Welcome back to the second part of my Hive deep dive. So in this video, we're going to be strictly going over the financials as well as the corporate update to get an idea of where this company is headed. So let's jump right into it. So we're here in the financial statements for Hive. We can see that they have a fairly well-funded balance sheet. If we look at their current assets, they have about $30 million in current assets, $10 million in cryptocurrencies, 13 in accounts receivable and prepaids, as well as 5.8 million in cash. Their total assets amounts to about $47 million worth. And then if we move down to their liabilities, we can see that they have about $10 million in current liabilities, which should easily be able to be covered by the current assets. And their total liabilities, there's not much extra on top of that. It's only $1.5 million in lease liabilities. Now moving on to their income statement, we can see that their income from mining hasn't really increased year over year. And the reason for that mainly is because they actually stopped their Bitcoin mining operations, which were happening in 2019, because it just became unprofitable. So that's why the revenue took a bit of a dive in early 2020. And since then, it's actually grown a little bit year over year, just because of the price appreciation of cryptocurrencies. But you can also see down here that the operating and maintenance costs have dramatically dropped compared to the previous year's quarters. And that's because, again, as I said, the Bitcoin mining operations last year were not very profitable. And actually they weren't profitable at all, which is why they stopped them. So this year their margins were a lot more healthy, I think sitting around 70% or so. If we go over to Finbox, yep, 70.1%. We can see that their expenses amount to around $1 million. And other things to note is that the reevaluation of digital currencies have actually increased this year. So the digital currencies that they hold actually went up in value from the beginning of the quarter to the end of the quarter. And then the gain on the sale of digital currencies, this is essentially the gain on their cryptocurrencies from the time that they mined it compared to the time that they sold it. So for example, if they mined Bitcoin at around $9,000 per Bitcoin, and then they sold it at $11,000 per Bitcoin, they'd be earning around $2,000 in a gain of sale. Further down in the income statement, we can see that they have a net income of $9.2 million. So this company is actually bringing in a profit. They're not like other growth stocks out there that are losing money in order to gain more market share, but they're gaining more market share as well as making a profit on this. Albeit the profit's not much, as it's only 3 cents per share, and right now the share price is around $2.53. So your return on your initial investment is not going to be that great. But the fact that the company is continuing to expand their data centers, I think their revenue per share is going to only go up from here, and eventually the P/E ratio is going to make sense. If we look at the statement of changes in equity, we can see that in the year 2019, it didn't really increase by much, only 1.5 million shares, which is nothing. Then from March 31st, 2020 to September 30th, 2020, so in the span of 6 months, they increased the equity by around 17 million shares here. It's not a big amount, and they didn't really do any sort of huge raises. They just issued 15 million shares for the Quebec acquisition, and there were a few options that were exercised. But this isn't them actually issuing new shares to raise capital for the business. So it's a good sign this company is able to use the funds from the operation to fuel their own growth. Now, if we move to the cash flow statement, this is the amount of money that they're bringing in actual cash. So the amount of income that they have for the period is not all cash. Some of it is offset by things like depreciation, share-based compensation, interest expenses, and then they also have amounts receivable, tax payable, which they already paid out in cash. So these are negative things to their cash balance. For the cash provided by the operating activities, essentially what's in the bank, is $5.9 million. They also have some investing activities, which is a negative cash flow to them because they use this to purchase mining equipment as well as for the Quebec acquisition. So $4 million went out the door for that. Then they also had financing activities. This is not them going out there and issuing shares to raise money. This is an exercise of warrants and options to some of their internal people or earlier investors. They also made some lease payments, which this impacted the cash flow negatively. But all in all, the cash flow for the period, they ended up having an increase of $700,000 in the amount of cash compared to the quarter before. The next thing that I want to note here is in section 19. And these are all the outstanding stock options. So you can see that they have some stock options that are expiring in 2022, and then a lot after in 2027 and onwards. So there aren't that many stock options in this company. They have about 17 million stock options outstanding, and when we look at the total number of shares, around 250 million shares, this is a very small percentage. And some of these stock options may be exercised, especially the ones at around 30 cents or 20 cents, because those people who are exercising them are probably looking to sell it out. And these are likely some employees or early investors. Now let's turn our attention over to a corporate update, which is also very important because this gives us the latest information on how the company is performing. So first off, they had the re-election or election of board directors, and it looks like everything was unanimous. I don't know too much about the management team because it's kind of hard to understand these people unless you can talk to them face to face. But the important thing about this corporate update is their Ethereum production and their Bitcoin production and their Sweden energy hedging. So first off, they've seen a slowdown in their Ethereum production. In the previous quarter, in Q2, they mined around 32,800 ethers. However, the reason why it slowed down is because there's more participants entering into the Ethereum ecosystem, which causes the rise in hash rate difficulty. So the average difficulty increased by over 27% compared to the prior quarter. Although the difficulty of Ethereum has increased, the price of Ethereum has increased also. So I think this will offset some of the increased mining costs. The second thing is Bitcoin production has increased. So this is a positive impact on the business. As for the Ethereum production slowdown, I think this is maybe a neutral impact because they have mined less Ethereum, but they also have a higher Ethereum price. So it'll probably net out somewhere around zero. But for the Bitcoin production increase, the company has experienced an increase in the number of Bitcoin mined thus far in this quarter to approximately 140 Bitcoins compared to 88 Bitcoins in the prior quarter. This is largely due to their investment in new generation miners. So there's an article written by them or a news release written on November 6th that they purchased around 1,200 next generation miners. Another thing that they're doing is they're turning on previously unprofitable old generation miners. And these are becoming profitable now because of the rise in price of Bitcoin. And Hive also mentioned that they're continuing to aggressively expend money on upgrading the efficiencies of their GPU chips to mine Ethereum in the cloud. And Hive is also reminding investors that they're aggressively spending money to upgrade the efficiencies of their GPU chips for mining Ethereum. So they're upgrading those 4 gigabyte memories up to 8 gigabytes. Now in terms of Sweden Energy, so their Sweden data center, they've been able to secure electricity costs at 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour USD. And they believe this is the lowest amongst their peers. So it looks like Hive is probably the best positioned miner out there in terms of Ethereum because their electricity costs are the lowest and their equipment is probably on par, if not better than their peers. They've given a bit more color down here in terms of their GPU memory chip upgrading from 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes, and it's going to cost them over $12 million USD. However, this is sponsored by their internal cash flows and sale of coins. We can also see one of the risks that they state here is that the company continues to experience logistical challenges in the movement of new equipment and personnel to install any new equipment due to COVID-19. If there was no pandemic that happened, they believe that their facilities would have been finished upgrading by now. Although they're experiencing this, their competitors are also experiencing this. So it's not too bad when we look at the competitive landscape. They also have a healthy coin inventory of both Ether and Bitcoin, and they have a strategy right now in place to build up their inventory through 2021. So I think that management is quite bullish on cryptocurrencies in terms of their price appreciation over 2021, and they're not in a hurry to sell their cryptocurrencies for cash. So I think that this is a good sign for us as investors because the experts are buying into cryptocurrencies right now or holding what they have and believing that the price of these currencies will go up in the future. So if you guys are investing in Ethereum or Bitcoin, Hive Blockchain Technologies agrees with you as well that the price is going to be going up in the next year. Now we're going to go over the charts just to see what we can find. So first off, one thing that we should notice is there's been a huge spike in volume in the past couple of weeks. And this is ultimately because of the rise in price of Bitcoin and it breaking out to new all-time highs. So Hive's price is actually tracked very well with Bitcoin and its movements, but really it's actually amplified. So Bitcoin moved up, I think maybe like 20 to 30%, but Hive's stock price moved from around 50 cents per share all the way up to about $2.50. That's a 5x increase when Bitcoin only increased by, let's say, 20 to 40%. Right now, we can see over the past 5 days, there's been a lot of consolidation as well as a lot of activity around the 260 level. We can see that there was strong volume moving up to its new all-time highs of $3.15 before the pullback came. And I think that going forwards, if we see Bitcoin boom up or move up another leg, we'll probably see Hive stock also move in step with that. Because ultimately, Hive is a Bitcoin and cryptocurrency miner, so they're going to move in step with cryptocurrencies themselves. There's not much in terms of technical here. Maybe if we switch over to the 1 hour chart. So right now, if we draw some lines here, this is probably the best pattern that I see right now. There's a bit of a support level right around here at the 240 mark. And then there's a decreasing support line, which shows that the price is converging. I think one thing right now to also notice is that there's a huge gap up on this date, and the price has actually come back down to fill up that gap. So we may see Hive stock price actually drop back down to $2.30, which you know for sure I will be buying here. If we do have some more negative movement, it'll probably drop back down to $1.80, which is where I'll load the boat. And I think that this would only happen if there's a pullback in cryptocurrency prices. And there are some theories out there floating around that we'll probably see some sort of retracement in Bitcoin where it drops below its previous all times of $20,000, maybe back down to $18,000 before moving back up. So that's kind of what I see from a technical standpoint. I would say the technicals are fairly weak for Hive right now, as there are no strong patterns forming. If you guys have any patterns and you see them, let me know in the comments down below. So now we're here on Google looking at Hive stock charts, but more importantly, we're looking at the market cap. The market cap of $853 million is as of December 23rd. And in my first part of this video, I was talking about revenue projections, and I expected Hive to make around $52 million in gross profits. So if we take the market cap of $853 million and divide it by $52 million, that's roughly around 16. So you can see that they could have a future PS ratio. So you can kind of imagine that their future PS ratio for this next year, if nothing changes for the business, will be around 16. Currently, the PE ratio reported by Google is 43.6, which is actually phenomenal for this company, which is a growth stage company. Typically, as I mentioned, growth stage companies don't have a PE ratio. So the fact that Hive does have one, I think gives them even more credibility as a business. But if you're looking at the stock chart and being like, wow, this stock has just run up like crazy, it's up like 500% since October, I think that looking at the metrics and the possibility of the revenue next year, the stock still trades at a relatively okay valuation. I wouldn't throw all my money into it right now, but I am heavily investing into it because I don't think that prices will come down. I mean, the only way that prices could actually come down right now is if Bitcoin or Ethereum has some sort of huge correction, maybe a 10 to 20%, which is not unheard of. So if you're willing to wait for that, then wait for that. Otherwise, dollar cost averaging is your best friend. If you found this video useful at all, leave a like down below, as well as leave any comments that you have on Hive's operations. If you have any questions about where the company's going or just general questions at all about the company, let me know in the comments down below as well. Subscribe if you're new here, and hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss a beat. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, click on this video right up here. And if you're interested in my predictions on Bitcoin, click on this other video over here. If you're there, I'll see you there. If not, keep up the grind and have a great day.